Welcome back to the Warsaw Security Forum. I'm your host, Klaudia Czerwińska. You're watching TVP World. And now it's the time to take another look at a different perspective coming from the heart of Europe on the current situation in Ukraine. And for that, I'm joined by my next guest, Dietmar Netan, the Federal Foreign Office Berlin, but also member of the Bundestag, the coordinator of German-Polish Intersocietal and cross-border cooperation. Thank you so much for joining us here in our special studio today.
Dzień dobry, and thank you very much for the invitation.
Pleasure as always. We are at a very particular time in this whole conflict. We are slowly approaching the three-year mark of the war in Ukraine, and the tension seems to be going up, and the countries, the European countries, are getting ready for what could possibly come, because we know that Russia is having those imperialistic thoughts and is being aggressive, and it's not afraid to show it. So I wanted to start by asking you, do you think that we might be actually approaching a larger conflict?
I must really say that I think we must prepare for a larger and for a longer conflict on the one hand, but if we really work hard to support Ukraine, that Ukraine can win this war, this aggression of Russian imperialism against the Russian people, then perhaps we come faster to a point where we can really achieve that there is not only a ceasefire, that there is really a development for a just peace. And the just peace is a peace that has to do with the conditions under what Ukraine could say, now we can stop defending because it's going in the right direction.
Obviously, this conflict that could possibly spill over if we're not being careful is widely discussed in Germany. What is the opinion on the conflict so far as of now, and the sort of support that Germany is willing to give to Ukraine as of now?
As always in open societies, we have in Germany different opinions, and look to the last state elections in Eastern Germany. We have forces like the so-called AfD or the so-called BSW from Mrs. Wagenknecht, who are abusing the longing of the people for peace to make the job of the Kremlin, to say we must only stop delivering weapons and then the war is over. And on the other hand, we have again a majority in Germany who thinks that we must support Ukraine in a way that Ukraine can win this war against the aggressive Russian imperialistic forces. Mm-hmm. And I think what we now must do in Germany is to explain the people. If we really want to come to a real just peace, Ukraine must win. And that is also the obligation for people like me in politics, members of parliaments, members of the government, to explain the people that we must have strategic patience. We should not give up, and we should invest much more than we did until today to bring Ukraine to the point that there is a stop of the war, but a stop of the war that brings a just peace for the Ukrainian people.
From a German perspective, what would you say within the government is the most important, most burning issue when it comes to security of the region? Because on one hand, we're talking about Ukraine, but we also have to take care of our, so to speak, neighborhood. Yeah. When we were approaching the EU parliamentary elections, there were definitely ways in which, for example, cybersecurity wanted to be used by Russia in order to meddle with the election process. So I'm wondering, what's the approach of Germany when it comes to cybersecurity and security and defense as a whole, and the heart of the European Union?
So I mentioned the support for Ukraine. The other thing is strengthening the so-called east flank of NATO with a much more invest in defense capabilities. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned it, to make clear that we are at the front line because Mr. Putin and the Kremlin is making a war against our open societies with cyber attacks, with disinformation campaigns, with supporting right-wing populist movements in a lot of European countries. And for Germany, it makes sense, and it's the priority for our government to see not only one point. Of course, supporting Ukraine is the most important, but we should not forget to do what we can do to secure our eastern flank. We must cooperate, for example, with Poland and with other partners when it comes to cybersecurity, when it comes to work hard against disinformation campaigns. We must see that we have a real broad scale of interventions from the Russian side to destroy our open societies.
I would also like to take a slightly broader look, so outside of bounds of the European Union and Europe as a continent. When we're looking at the NATO structures, and at the back of our heads we have the upcoming U.S. presidential election, well, there is a potential chance of Donald Trump taking over office, and we've heard multiple times the solutions he has. I was actually, the other night, I was looking at the interview he gave to Lex Friedman, and he said that he has an exact plan of what he wants to do, but he cannot reveal it because part of the plan is that it's a surprise. And based on his previous statements, we could potentially think that he would somewhat withdraw the support for Ukraine. What do you think? If Donald Trump were to take office in November, what would happen to Ukraine?
So I hope that Kamala Harris is winning, to be honest, but how should I say? On the one hand, we have our fears that Trump, with his erratic policy making, brings us in a big trouble. On the other hand, he is not really predictable. So I don't want
It's a surprise element, I'm afraid. I think it's a surprise element.
Yes, but so we cannot predict what he will really do. We must think about what can we do as Europeans. And I think if we can show a potential President Trump, look, we invest more than in your first term in defense. Look, the issue, because of other reasons, but the issue of Nord Stream is over. Look, we are working...
But do we have all these sorted? Pardon if I'm interrupting you, but do we have these things sorted? Are we, in your opinion, are we spending enough on defense as of now? Are we there? Only earlier today I spoke to Mr. Johansson from Saab in Sweden, and he said that his feeling as a person working for a military and defense company is that Europe is not doing enough, that we need to pick up our speed. What's your opinion?
I would say Europe is doing a lot. I don't know if we do in the moment enough, but I'm clear that we must do more in future. But we are on the right track. Comparing with the times before the phases of the full-scale war against Ukraine started in the beginning.
We're left with no choice at this point, I suppose.
We left with no choice, but it sounds a little bit cynical, but that what happened to the Ukrainian people showed us, especially in Germany, where we had made huge mistakes, and you cannot win the time back, but you can learn from your mistakes. And I think we are now on a better track. And I must tell you that especially the new Polish government is forcing not only Germany, the others in the European Union to do more, because if we show that we do more and that we want a fair burden sharing, that the Europeans are doing what they must do to support Ukraine and to support more capabilities for security in Europe, it would be the best argument to convince Mr. Trump not to do things that would be not in the interest, for example, even for Ukraine.
This is definitely something that is going to be very dynamic, especially in weeks to come when we're thinking about the upcoming U.S. election. I think the eyes of the world are going to shift to the U.S. Thank you so much for joining me and for your invaluable point of view here today. It's a pleasure.
Thank you very much and all the best.
Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, this was Dietmar Netan from the Federal Foreign Office, Germany. I'm Klaudia Czerwińska, your host, and please remember to stay here on TVP World tuned for more news and features.